Money. It's actually something that it seems like we're fearful to talking about that. It's almost as it's a taboo thing in our society today, but it's so important because everything has risen up with the inflation in the last couple of years, whereas everything is costing more money, and it's been proven that so many people are living pay to make to make end meets. So I decided today as a real estate agent to talk about finances, to actually bring somebody in to talk about finances because it is such a core value in order to be capable of buying a home, of reselling a house, of being able to live in it adequately and not being at that situation where you end up at the end of the rope and you need to sell because you're not able to live anymore. By the way, my name is Jonathan Cabana, your real estate agent for the Greater Montreal, and today I'm bringing to the table, and I invited my guest. He's a good friend of mine. He's an incredible human being. I mean, the guy is kind, he's attentionate, and I know that if anybody of you wants to talk to him, I'll put his information in the description. But this person is a great person, and he's also a financial advisor, so he's going to be able to help you out. But furthermore, this individual was is in the army, in the Canadian Reserve Army, and I mean, he's the guy to go to if ever you feel in danger and if you ever want to be secure with. So I'm proud to bring out my guest, my friend, and my big friend, Jeorey Downey. Gio, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you. I appreciate that. You're
My
too kind.
well,
Not that cool. Not that cool.
well, let's start with this. Talk to me about you a little bit, with your roadmap. Who are you, and present yourself to us.
So I'm Jeorey Downey. I work with PFSL. Bit of my roadmap is family. Growing up,
Mhm.
we didn't really understand too much about income, and my grandparents kind of left me a lot of money for about 20 years. They invested, and there was nothing that grew. So I just got the lump sum. So I was about maybe hundreds, $100,000 or more in
Oh,
opportunity cost. Now that I know now,
hmm.
and something like that. So I wanted to kind of make a difference
Okay.
for the population. That's a bit of my roadmap.
And what kind of brought you into the financial world?
So that's pretty much that's what brought me into the finances to make a difference. And there's a lot of from what I see a lot in the field, there's a lot of questions that aren't being answered and a lot of cookie cutter templates for families and
Mm,
stuff like that. A lot of misinformation on Reddit and not really specific to
okay.
certain people.
Okay.
So that's about it.
All right. So what I want to do with you is I actually want to pitch out a couple of questions,
Yeah.
making sure that anybody and everybody who can come here can actually get some part of information that you're going to give us today. And also afterwards, bringing it back a little bit more oriented to it with real estate. All right. Is that something that you're comfortable with?
Yeah, for
All right.
sure.
So, I mean, what what are the most common mistakes, financial mistake people make when they're managing money?
So not taking really advantage of appropriate accounts or having a plan in place. So it's not always about what you make, but it's also about what you keep. So
Hmm.
if you imagine your budget, you guys can see me on the camera.
Yeah.
So if you imagine your budget is like this, what you keep through government benefits could be an added value to what you make in the economy. So it's really being in the right place for you and having the right investment kind of principles, but also eliminating your liabilities effectively. And
When
yeah,
you talk about liability, I mean, it seems to me like you're on page 15 and I'm like really on page 2, something
oops.
like that. All right. So talk to me as if I know nothing. What are liabilities that you're talking about?
So liabilities, well, I would say more like bad debt. That's I
Okay.
want to clarify. Not really understanding what kind of things you're going to do to put yourself in a bad financial situation, or not
Okay.
really understanding their budget or where everything's going,
Hmm.
is a very common mistake. And just kind of living day to day.
Okay. But speaking of living day to day, I mean, you and I, we've known each other for a couple of years right now. I mean, I can't imagine how can I, like, a young couple, okay? How can someone like create and stick to a realistic budget if we look at it that way? What ballpark figure, what should they need to do to start with?
Well, there's something called the Rule of 30. It's actually a book by a fiduciary.
You want to show it to me?
Say again?
Do you want to show it to me? I think
Oh,
you're
yeah,
looking
sure.
at it.
I really like this guy. He's actually a Canadian writer, so you don't see a lot of Canadian articles, and I like to focus on because there's a lot of U.S. stuff, but this guy is good.
Cool.
One of his things that he states is a lot of people don't know what they should do with their money. You know, there's all this like, should I put 10% and this and that? And one he offers a solution that's kind of variable. It's not a template. So he says 30% of your gross pay, minus your mortgage, rent, child raising, and short-term expenses is something that you should invest.
Okay.
So it's not 10%. And you know, when you're or you know, you should save and store away if you can. So at your younger ages, you might be, it kind of adapts you to your younger ages, but also when you get higher and you have more responsibilities, that kind of changes as well. So it's adaptable. So or specific taxes and you know, tracking expenses with a budgeting app.
Okay. Do you have any app in mind? Is there like something easy to find?
So there used to be Intuit. They used to have something called Mint. They removed that. There's a few out there. I haven't really found anything that sticks. So I made an Excel spreadsheet for my clients.
Okay.
Yeah, I could share that with you.
Yeah. It's actually, it would be something. And is it something hard and complicated to do, or is that something that you can actually track easily?
You can track easily. It updates you, and it puts you. It compares you compared to the other to the rest of Canada. So you can kind of see where you are in different brackets of like, I don't know, groceries, or if you're in possibly, I don't know, restaurants and stuff like that. If you use this, it kind of categorizes everything, kind of like Mint did, but not as advanced. Obviously, it's a spreadsheet.
But I'm knowing you, I'm pretty sure it's actually probably quite a good spreadsheet.
It's quite good, yeah.
Okay, fair enough. My other question is this. I know that, you know, when I was young, like a long time ago, I had difficulty keeping money. I mean, it came in, it came out, it came in, it came out, and I didn't really thought about having like an emergency fund. So explain to me, why is having an emergency fund important, and how much should it ideally contain?
Good question. And you know what? All these answers I'm going to give you really depends person to person. It's not, I just want to clarify, it's not financial advice holistically, right? Because this is not trying to give a cookie cutter. But so the recommended amounts of money is about 3 months of expenses for somebody. 3 months for somebody that is working, that is employed, and about at minimum of expenses, right? Not income. And 6 months for somebody that is self-employed, because it could be harder to get an employment after that, or to get back on track. So it really just depends, but that's about 3 to 6 months. That's recommended.
Okay. And so 3 months for people who are employed. Why is it? Because they're going to get like what's it called? Le chômage in English. What's the name?
Exactly. Unemployment insurance.
Unemployment insurance. Okay, so that's why, because when you're self-employed, you don't get that. So that would be probably the reason why it's important to have about 6 months and for that purpose specifically.
Well, 3 to 6 months. I mean, you get it. I don't remember the exact amount of time you get it, but you get it pretty soon after if you qualify.
Okay.
But it's really 3 to 6 months. You should be pretty good. You know, of expenses, again, not income, of expenses.
And this makes me think, per pay, you were talking about 30% that you would put aside. Is that it?
So that could be part of it. The more the better, but that's like so that's part of that is for retirement. That kind of thing, or longer and future bigger goals. The emergency fund would be a bit separate. It would just be one-time thing in a market that wouldn't move too much, because if you need it tomorrow, then you're in big problems if it possibly goes down, because we know the markets can fluctuate depending on what you've been doing.
Okay. So, and let's talk about, like, we know, and I figured it out the hard way, that you need to have a good credit, right? So you need to be, why? Because it gives you the capacity to buy a car. It gives you the capacity to buy a home eventually and stuff like that. So tell me about what's kind of the best way to build and or improve your credit score in order to pertain and planify these types of purchases.
Well, there's, there are different kinds of credit, or different kinds of loans will affect your credit differently, just having it. And besides the obvious of paying it, which everybody knows, that's a hard factor as well, right? Not being in collections or Fayette, bankruptcy. But aside from that, you have three kinds of really credit. You have your credit cards that are very easy to start off with when you're younger. You have little companies, but then you can move on to, like,
let me ask you a quick question with credit cards. Do you think that an 18-year-old should have a credit card?
Yes,
Why?
I do believe so.
Okay, why?
Well, because he needs to start building his credit, their credit history at a young age, so they could qualify for what they're going to need in the future.
What would be though the la mise en garde that you would tell those people?
Not to spend more than 30% of your card, and don't spend anything that you don't have in the bank. See it as a debit card.
Okay, so you got the money before you spend the money.
100%.
That's about it. Yeah, that makes sense. Doesn't mean that all the people were able to do that, but it does make sense, and that would give you the capacity to actually start working on your credit, right?
And if I may add, get a cashback credit card as well. That'll help you pay some of your your expenses.
Oh, why? What does those type of credit cards give?
Right. So you can get, like, I don't know, 1% or depending on the company, or 2%. After you buy something, it kind of lowers your fees by 1 or 2% technically, right? Because you're getting it back. So it makes a big difference if you're spending a lot, if you're starting to spend in the year. Another thing, like you've asked, what do we need to do with these credit cards, is to stay below the 30% of total debt. Because it shows the credit, because if you're above 30% of your total credit available to you, it's kind of showing the creditors that you're dependent on credit. And you don't want to be dependent. You don't want to seem dependent on credit. You want to be on your stuff. Okay. So if you're above 30%, it will decrease your credit score.
Even if you have an already high credit score, it could actually hinder your credit score without you having any bad credit on it.
It will hinder. It's not could. It will hinder your credit score.
Okay. Wow, that's something actually quite interesting. So let's get back to the questions, because you were talking about different types of credit score. So we've taken the credit cards. What else would you actually put into that field?
So there's other variables too for the credit in general that affects your credits. But there's other. So all the variables all apply to all of them, like your credit history, how long you've had your credit for, if you're paying on time, if you're in, if you're in collection or bankruptcy. So that's if you miss like 2 payments, they can send it to another institution to take it back. That's a big no on your credit score.
Okay.
There's a few others. How closing your credit card could be bad for you.
Why?
Because you lower your credit history as well. So you have your card open, you can lock it. If you don't trust yourself with a credit card or whatever, lock it, cut it up, keep it open until you do trust yourself again, because you might not even be able to qualify as well. That's another thing that I just did recently with another dossier.
Okay.
So to go on your question about different kinds of credits that are possibly available for you. So like a loan is different than a credit card. And you'll get more points off a loan. I don't remember exactly how much you would get, but a loan, so like a registered retirement savings plan loan or something like that, you'll get more points for that. Or like a car payment as well. If you buy a car you have secured and unsecured loans, and rotating credit like a credit card.
This question comes to mind though. In all the things that you just spoke, credit card, loan, car loan, would that be considered a bad type of credit?
Everybody's answer is different in the industry.
Okay.
It's not necessarily a bad kind of credit, but I wouldn't buy something that you couldn't pay for cash. Usually, if you're starting, that's a bit harder, but like buying a new vehicle, that's very debatable if it's a good decision, because it comes with insurance premiums, comes with your depreciation right after buying it.
I think it's like about 35% that you lose in a car as soon as you step out of the concession.
Yeah, and you got those insurance premiums too that you're responsible for. People don't realize when you get a new vehicle how high they can be, and very, very high. That goes in the budget, right?
True.
So you have to take it. You don't have a choice of pizza toppings. It's full.
It comes with it, and you don't have any choice about it.
That's right.
All right. Yeah. So my other question is that we've talking about putting money out, credit card, using money that isn't yours. Let's go into the rabbit hole of investing. So if I'm a new guy, so I have no clue what I'm doing. I got about $1,000 in my pocket. I work at minimum wage. So let's put this as the worst case scenario possible.
Understand.
How can I start investing? And what are some beginner-friendly investment options that I could actually use? And then you can actually give me also example for a couple that wants to buy a first home and stuff like that. So what type of investments can I do that's not too aggressive and that I would actually have my capital close to being guaranteed?
Well, you summarized it very well. That's exactly what you would need, an emergency fund.
Okay.
Oh. So a high interest savings accounts, which are pretty standard. Nobody knows where the market's going to go. So with anybody, one company might perform better 1 year and then the other one goes 1 year. If it rains in Montreal, it rains over everybody, right?
Yeah. So
but it doesn't.
What type of return could I expect from that type? Because I actually do believe that the more risk you take, the more interest rate you're bound to get.
Not necessarily, actually. That's something I've learned. You could have, so generally, yes and no. But as at one point, so for your scenario, for somebody that has 1K, my biggest concern for them is, what if your car breaks down and you can't get that money machine working for you, your job? So what are you going to do now? So this is why we need an emergency fund. 100%, like you said, kind of something close to guaranteed that you can pull out right away, not a locked-in GIC that you can't pull out.
Again, you're on page 15. I'm on page 2. But
so guaranteed income certificates. So you could lock in your money.
Okay.
So for most of them, I'm not saying all. But you don't want to lock anything in. You want something that's available right away, and maybe even in your tax-free savings account, right? Not a registered retirement savings plan, because you might get taxed when you pull it back out. So that's where the right kind of account also plays. Not just the investment, but the advice also goes with the right kind of account for the right individual.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. I had forgotten to ask you a question. What's the difference between? Well, my question has like two questions in them. My first one would be, what's the difference between a good debt and a bad debt? So
one works for you and the other one works against you, right? We know a lot. Just to give you an example, we know that debt is not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah.
We know a lot of wealthy people have no money to their name, or a lot of wealthy people have debt because it's okay to borrow money if it's working for you or growing.
Okay.
Right? Like a business, or maybe you're borrowing money to put in your RSP, a lump sum, so you get that tax return and increase family allocations right away. Those could be immediate returns. That's not a bad thing, and it's growing in the economy and you're paying it off. But when you start getting bad debts, or even a house, real estate,
Mhm.
right? Like what you do,
Yeah,
it's appreciating, it's going up, right?
it
You
is.
got the property going
It's
up.
actually one of the
uh,
safest investment that you can have.
there you go.
It is. All right, and second to that, my
Oh, I didn't tell you what a bad debt was, though.
yeah, yeah.
In
Please, please,
contrast
please
to
go
that,
ahead. Go
yeah,
ahead.
a bad debt would maybe be, if you have if you can't, you don't want to put restaurants on your credit card and not be able to pay it.
Okay.
You don't want to be in debt and not eat it to eat, right? That's something you need to pay cash. So if you
Mhm.
can't afford it, it's cash. It's not credit. Or a bad debt would be a car, I would think, a new car.
It's not an asset.
Personal,
The thing is, the people, unless you have like a collections car, I
that's
don't
right.
believe that a car is any type of assets. It's
Right,
always like
that's
a
true.
bad debt. That would be so true. How should that brings me to that question because we do
Yeah.
know that the debt per capita in Canada is incredibly high. I think it's like 50
About
grand per head or something like that.
something like that.
Yeah, it's something like that. So how somebody that really wants to take in hand and take control of his life, I mean, how should that person approach paying off high interest debt like credit cards, for example?
So that's one of those really special questions, right?
Hmm.
Situation dictates.
Yeah.
There are interesting things that you can do to pay off some of your debts. I did write some down. Uh, so it really just depends on the person.
Hmm.
So if you want to pay off a credit card, it depends even where your credit is, because you might be suffocating with your credit card,
Yeah.
but you might still have a good credit,
Okay.
right? So you could leverage like consolidation or something like that, but sometimes you can't because your credit drops. So another thing you can maybe leverage is like an RRSP loan,
Hmm.
registered retirement savings plan loan, if your income makes sense. If you're at a lower income, maybe not.
Okay.
If you're above, then you can take those tax returns. So this you can leverage maybe in January, February, like right now.
Hmm. So
And then
this would be like the period to invest in our RSPs, right?
yeah, well, if appropriate in the first place, it depends on the family.
Mm.
But you have other things you can do too, right? So you could there's a logical way. How many credit cards do you have? 2, 3, 7. You have the car loan. You have minimum payments, max. You have to pay your minimum payments. I forgot to mention that.
Yeah.
But there might be one credit card that's higher than the other. So you do want to pay all the minimum on all of them, but you want to pay the credit card with the highest interest rate
Okay.
plausibly first.
Hmm.
And or you can even do balance transfers, apply for another credit card with a lower credit limit, and that's going to lower interest rate, sorry, and that could also decrease your monthly obligation and save you, uh, make you keep a bit more money. Does
Or
that kind
make
of make
you,
sense?
or actually make you able to pay more capital that you owe instead of just paying the
Yes,
interest. Because,
because
for example, if we put that into numbers, that you have a card at 20% and you're able to find a new one
yeah,
at 10%,
right,
if you drop everything there, this gap between 20 and 10, if
yeah,
you keep paying the same amount, you're going to be paying more capital that you owe, not capital, but debt instead of paying interest because it's not capital, it would be debt, right?
that's right.
Okay.
And sometimes you can even leverage like a cosigner or something like that, but that gets really touchy on an interpersonal level.
Yeah.
It is doable to get like an RSP loan, but it depends on the person and the family
And
interaction.
I do believe
Sure.
in there's a saying that money is the destroyers of family. So this is something
Yeah,
that we always need to be careful, I would presume.
that's right.
Yeah. So
That's
so,
right.
so bringing a little bit more like round circle around your function and your job. Talk to me about the benefits of working with you. So I mean, I know nothing in life. I come and talk to you and say, Gio, uh, why should I work with you? Compared to managing my finances alone.
Well, you know what? Maybe you shouldn't. I don't know. We'd have to kind of see what you're doing now just to see
Okay.
what the gap might look like in the first place, kind of thing, or what you're kind of doing for strategies, if any, and seeing what kind of results you can get.
Okay.
But to answer your question, the the thing, the an advisor will help you. A good
Mm.
advisor, not all. I can't speak for everybody. You have your budget in the middle, like I was telling you before.
Yeah.
What you keep can come from being in the right accounts for
Hmm.
being the right person. So you can keep more money from government benefits, like I don't know, like registered education savings plans. You can get about a 30% grant just by putting money in. Everybody can, right? Almost everybody. So that's already a 30%. And then what you gain from the economy after that, I don't want to talk about interest rates because everybody makes the same interest rates. Somebody might get higher or lower at the year. But that's an added value to working with somebody, is being in the right thing, the sweet spot for you, respectively, as an individual. That is the added value. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
or should I go a bit deeper into that? Up to you.
Well, I would presume also that you probably have better knowledge of me, of everything that actually is around. Do you play in the stock market by any chance? In your function, do you play?
I don't. I have really highly educated people that are much smarter than me, that are building funds with master degrees. They get home, and when they're going to do their business, say it like that, they're reading all these newspapers. I don't have time for that because I'm building plans for you. So I'm taking their funds that they create, just like any other financial institution. I work with McKinsey. I work with AGF.
So these are like big portfolios, whereas depending, is it like depending on your risk tolerance, you're going to send them to this portfolio and the other one?
So you got your risk tolerance, and you also you got a time horizon. When will you need the money? Also, how you feel towards the market and the different levels of fluctuations. And
no, but go ahead, because you just
mentioned and I want to brush on that. It's a good time to brush on that. Not necessarily because you're taking more risks are you going to get more money at the end. With a professional portfolio and a blend of investments that's proprietary, sometimes you could lower that risk and still get some decent returns. If you go on Morningstar, you're going to see ratings of portfolios 1 to 5. They kind of take everything, standard deviation, so how much can go up, down, everything in consideration for that bracket. Actually,
it shows that you know what you're talking about, because as you're speaking to me, I'm like hearing Chinese.
Oh, I apologize.
No, but it's okay. It's okay. I mean, that's probably one of the main reasons a person should sit down with a financial advisor, because you know your stuff and I don't have access or knowledge to all those scenarios behind it. So that makes sense why we should sit down. We should sit down with you. But you said something that you were talking about life plans and stuff like that.
Very important.
What advice do you have for people who want to save for big life goals like education, retirement, home, stuff like that?
To be in the right account, to seek advice, and to be the right advisor that you feel comfortable with. That's very important. And one thing I can give you as an advice is there are numbers that are more plausible for you to get this and that. But if you do not follow that plan, the numbers are worthless. So it has a lot to do with emotions. It's better to save consistency. It's better to be at $100 at a time, or $200 at a time, than trying to do a plan that's perfect at $500 and you just stop doing it because you don't like that plan. You need to feel comfortable with it and getting that consistency. So whatever is going to make you consistent, don't feel too pressured. It has to be personalized to you too as an individual. Right?
That brings me to my other question, but I did want to make a caveat real quick, because you're talking about like regularly putting $100 aside. Explain to people the principle of compound interest, because this comes into factor if you are regularly putting money aside. What's the effect of compound interest on that money?
That's a good question. So let's say we have $100. And we're putting in $10. Let's say we have $100 and we get a compound interest of,
let's say 10%.
Say 10%. We should say 9 in the industry maximum, but I'm just trying to make it easier.
Yeah, make it like easy figures.
So let's say you
10%.
So you get $110. You get $10 at the end of the year at, let's say, 10% hypothetical.
Mhm.
After that 110 also grows at 10%. So you're growing on a bigger and bigger number. Your percent, you're compounding on a bigger number.
So the second year, instead of making like, if and tell me if I'm understanding this correctly. So on that $100, first year you make $10 because it's 10%. Then on that 110, you're making actually $11. So the dollar, well, it's small figures in order to understand it. So, but that buck is actually interest on the interest, which is the principle of compound interest.
Right, and if it was 100,000, you got 10,000, and then you got 11,000 gains. So you're at 121,000 on the second. Another variable that we didn't talk about are the 3Ds of investing. So diversification, don't put all your eggs in one basket. That kind of minimizes the risk. Different industries, different sections of the world, and within these different industries, different companies. So if one company drops, another company can pick up, right? Or one industry drops, avionics and COVID, another one can go up, pharmaceuticals, right? Or even if there's, God forbid, something happens with a certain region, another region can pick up. Now hold on, diversification. Other one is dollar cost averaging. As the economy is moving up and down, as you're putting in your money, you don't want to time the market. This is why you put a consistent pay, because you can take advantage of when the market kind of goes down, when it goes down on liquidation, or like when you go to the grocery store and you buy bananas at 69 cents a pound, but now they're 50 cents a pound. Are they worth less? No, you're getting a deal. And the same thing with units of stocks. When the market goes down and you're constantly putting it, that also affects your gains at the end of the year because you're buying things at liquidation. I don't know if that's a little too technical for.
Well, let me try to understand this and tell me if it makes sense. So when the market goes down, let's say my share that I would buy usually at $75, if I buy it at 50, I could actually buy 1.5 instead of having $1 price. Is that it? So that same $100 would have more power buying power. So that's what you're telling me right now, right?
There's actually studies that you don't want the market to go up. The person that buys on a market only going up and a person that buys on a fluctuating market will generally come out with more money because they're buying at liquidation.
And I think I've heard something once that they always say buy the dip. So buy when.
Oh no! That's timing the market. Don't say that.
You don't say that. Okay.
No, we're not allowed to do that.
Okay, good. I'm a real estate agent. That's
some Reddit advice.
So people, please don't listen to me when I'm saying that. Okay.
No, I'm just giving you a hard time. There's another one, discipline also. So you have your consistency. So the 3Ds, just to recap, is discipline, diversification, and I forgot the third one. Discipline, diversification. It'll come back to me. And dollar cost averaging, what we were just talking about.
Okay, cool. Now, I mean, we have people. Well, we're all like that, except a couple people. But how do you recommend balancing? I mean, saving for future while enjoying the present.
That's another. So I love that question. And you know what? Not a lot of advisors go over that. Not enough, because we're all very technical people. I'm sure I have a good book if you permit me to share that.
Go ahead, man. I'm all about that.
Aside from that rule of 30 is all those financial numbers for the people that are, growing as or the wealthy barber even is a good book for numbers.
Okay.
But when you're talking about that emotional thing and enjoying the moment, it's die with zero. And this is something I was missing for quite a few years.
Okay.
I love this book. It's by Bill Perkins. And I don't want to go off topic, but
so that would be a good read to have.
Yes.
Okay.
It's very important to live your life as well. So that's the whole thing when you're talking to your advisor. It's very personal to you. And that's why we kind of want to put in 30, minus all those other things, and you want to have some money for you. There's no point in I can go on so many things because we're talking about growing at a big misconception also is when you get to retirement that you're going to constantly need the same. No, at 65 to 72, you're at strong and you're healthy and you want to go out and enjoy most of that money. You're going to be spending a lot more, and then 72 to 80 is kind of like a medium go stage. Before it was a go. Okay. So you're going to decrease, and you need to plan all that. And at 80, then you're not as healthy. You're plausibly not as healthy, and you're going to decrease even more. So you actually want to make a plan, not a constant plan. It will fluctuate. Okay. I don't know if I answered your question. I kind of jumped into that, but you have to live the moment. So you have to spend on you now, go on vacation, stuff like that. That's why you need shorter funds, and also to buy your house for the future. Everything is discussable.
Okay. So now I do want to bring it back a bit and go down a little bit, focus more on real estate, because I am a realtor. I love finance. I do think that it's a core part of being capable of buying a house. And if you don't have a good financial plan, or if you don't have your finances in order, you're probably never going to be able to be an owner, especially today, where new homeowners are almost not able anymore to buy homes without having their parents coming in and helping out. So if I'm a young adult, let's say I'm a young adult, I'm with my girlfriend, I'm about 25 years old, what financial steps should I take before buying my first home?
So considering the credit, that's the big one. Consider having a good down payment, or a decent down payment. Consider down payment. Everybody has a different philosophy on that, and how much you should pay. But it really depends on the person. It's situational. But the minimum is 5. Yeah. The minimum of down payment is 5 up to 500,000. And then after 500,000, you have to put everything after 500,000 is 10%.
Yeah, and also there's also, depending if you're buying a plex, how many doors, etc. All right, but that actually brings me up to my second question. I mean, how much of a down payment should? We know that they can put 5, and we know that when they put over 20, la SCHL, which is Genworth and stuff like that, steps aside from, and for those people who don't know, Genworth and la SCHL is a governmental, well, not Genworth, that's a private institution, but la SCHL is a governmental institution that guarantees your loan to the bank. So if you don't pay, so let's say you're under, well, your cash down is like under 20%, that institution will guarantee the loan to the bank if you ever come as a default payment. So that's what it is. Genworth is a private company that does the same thing. I think today it's actually called Sagen, by the way, if I'm not mistaken. So, but ideally, how much of a down payment should a buyer aim for, and how does it impact their mortgages?
It's really situation by situation. I'm not supposed to talk. Well, okay, mortgage, I can talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, well, not diving into like precise stuff, because I know that mortgage people, that's their job.
That's it.
Okay.
So how much down payment should they put? So like you said, if you put 5% up to the 20%, if you don't put down the 20%, in other words, you're gonna have to pay that insurance that you were talking about.
Yeah.
Which is about 1% or so.
Yeah, depending on the bracket, and I'll be able to talk this in another podcast with a mortgage guy.
That's right.
But where I want to bring you in that question, because I know it's not your job, but for example, let's take a $400,000 house. Okay, so it's 5% is $20K. Well, it's a lot of money. So how does one come forth to being capable of getting that money in the market of today? So that's more like where I want to bring you with that question, because I know the technicalities of mortgages it's not your purpose in life to do that.
That's right. So the rule of 30, saving up some of that money, being in the right account, a really decent strategy that we see is with the first home by savings account. Before it was the wrap through the RRSP, which still exists,
Yeah.
but there's a more lucrative option with with no disadvantages. Well, very little,
Okay.
if any, is that one, and you can put up to 8K a year.
Okay.
As soon as you open it, a nice strategy would be opening it on December, like let's say 29th or 27th. So then you can, if you put even $25 in there, and you know you're gonna have money coming in January, you'll actually have 16K because you're gonna have that back from the fiscal year from from January 1st, from December, from let's say 2024, and then 2025 you'll have another 8K. So
is that what we call in French the new thing that the government put forth, the Selly app? Is that it?
Yeah, in French it's a Selly app. Yeah.
Okay. So now I'm gonna sound a little bit stupid. How does that work?
So that was the first component of that.
Okay.
So you put your money, and it's important. The strategy with that is that from January 1st, let's say 2024, to, I know we're in 2025 right now, but to let's say December 29th, let's say, before the new year, or 31st. That is the fiscal year for the taxation bracket. Unlike the RRSPs, which is, we'll get into that maybe later, but so any money you put in that bracket will be seen on that year as a how do you say, a fiscal deduction. Okay. So let's say you put in let's say you make 50K a year, and you put in that full 8K, the government has already taxed you, a person that's employed, not an independent worker, because they might pay at the end of the year. That's why I'm saying situation dictates. But for most people, they're paying on their, let's say their 50K a year, constantly paying taxes. And at the end of the year, you put in that 8K. It's like you've only made 42,000, right? It decreases it. And the government's like, oh, I might have overcharged you in taxes, right? And then you get that tax refund as a reflection. That's why it's important to do your taxes too. But that's not me, but it is important.
It is important. I think it's a good habit to do, because if they ever have to come to see you, they will never be kind about that. So other question, I mean, how do you know if and when you're financially ready to invest in real estate?
You know what, Jonathan, that's a very good question.
Because by the way, so people understand, you and I went on that road a couple of years back. So for people to actually know, Gio and I came to know each other on certain Facebook groups, and with time we began a good friendship, and he asked me to buy his first home, which is something I'm very proud of. He's like my city neighbor, so it's a beautiful process that we went together. So, but you know firsthand, I mean, how you figured out when you were actually ready to invest in real estate.
It really depends on the person as well. You see a lot of things, but it depends if you're moving a lot. If you're changing city to city and you're not ready to settle down, it might not be appropriate in the first place to get real estate, because you have to pay all those taxes that bienvenue, the welcome taxes. So that's an immediate thing. But if you are ready to settle down and you do have the means and you have the 5%, and I would never, personally, on a financial level, not giving, I would never get the highest that you can on your, maybe not. It depends on the person. Because if you're given, I can talk a bit about my situation, or a lot of situations in Canada. You're not quite sure where life's going to go when you're with a significant other, and there's a lot of statistics, especially increasing right now, on that. And if you're paycheck to paycheck on that, both of you, and then something happens between both of you, and you can't pay it, that could be a concern. Okay. So you want to also have that on your financial levels too. You want to maybe not be at the highest level, personally.
Okay.
But that's just,
And you were talking about, let's make something that you were talking about, the variation in the market. Is there any impact, or does the market's timing play anything in real estate investment and buying a house and something like that?
That's more a question for you. But
Well, I would say actually, to answer that, I would say definitely yeah, because it is also something. Let's talk about inflation. Okay, let's talk
sure.
about how the market reacts and what happened with, like, we know, a carbon tax here and everything like that, which actually affects every part of the market. Make
Yep.
it like buying food, buying gas, everything like that. So we know that inflation, what is it? It's us printing more money, making it sort that our dollar that we have is worth less than what it was worth last year at the same period.
Right.
So we have a lot more money on the market, which is worth less because we don't stop printing some. So by flooding the market, we are making sure that the rates went up.
It's
And
true.
so, yeah, you are correct that I can answer that question finally.
But well, to add another point on that,
Yes.
a lot of times the interest rates. That's another thing too, and also involved in my industry. Like you said, it's a loss of purchasing power.
Hmm.
Essentially, is what inflation is. So $1 today won't go as far as $1 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Right.
Agreed.
And if our salaries aren't increasing at the same level as inflation, which they generally don't, there's actually a loss of purchasing power every single year.
Yeah.
You can
Well,
buy less and less with your
you had
income
seen
every
that graph. I'll try to link it. I don't know if you and I had talked about it. Whereas we see in the 70s the money per person versus the price of buying a house. So you have
Yeah,
those
I
wages,
saw it.
and they're following each other. So you have the prices of homes here
Yeah,
and the wages, and suddenly the homes goes like, poof.
yeah, I saw that too. I know
It's
you looked at that. Yeah,
incredible to see the gap between the
I
two.
did.
So, and that's why today it's very difficult for new home buyers, and you better be
Sure.
very disciplined in order to buy a new house today, because of that gap and that discrepancies between one and the other. Yeah, it is something that it's incredible to see the difference.
And I'd like to add though, we didn't talk about those other fees, right? You have like the notary fees that you need to save up for, and if you have the count for, like, let's say you have a septic tank that you need to check every single year. There's a lot of, or condo fees or stuff like that. There's sometimes other fees that you need to consider in your budget for what's appropriate for you too.
You need to
That's
anticipate.
very important.
In your case, so let's say that I don't want to get into the specifics of the numbers, but
Yeah.
if
Well,
you
we
were
can.
to tell me, okay, so you're paying a certain amount of mortgage
Sure.
per month, how
Yeah.
much percentage do you need to add to that amount? So in order to anticipate those different types of things that you just spoke about.
Well, just for house repairs, I think they say 4%. Well, 1 to 4%, right? That you have to add if your roof goes or something like that. You might need. That's why you need the credit too, and all that stuff. But you can't. That's why you can't be too close to where you need to be. Right? The government can only protect you so much by limiting how much you're allowed to borrow, because that is literally governed by Canada, right? The debt ratio.
Okay.
But so to answer your question, besides the three, let's say 4% for fixing the home, I don't know. I'd say maybe another 2%.
So 6% of your mortgage or your pay?
Of my mortgage.
Okay, so let's say you would put $2,000 a month. 6% is $120 a month.
Yeah, maybe 6, 7, because you also have the house insurances as well, and depending on what mortgage company you're with, I believe they can make you have a life insurance on the house.
Yeah, they do.
Oh no, they can have mortgage. That's actually something I would like to touch up on for your industry.
Go ahead.
The difference between mortgage and life insurance.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's important to look at the difference, because if you get a mortgage insurance, they're usually acceptable, interchangeable, but one institution will do one thing.
Yeah.
The mortgage insurance, let's say you're mortgaged on $500,000 because you have a $500,000 house, you're going to constantly be paying the same premiums.
Yeah.
for life for, let's say, the 20 years or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
But you're gonna pay that. But let's say you pass away midway through at 250,000, but they're only gonna pay 250,000 for the house. So you're still paying on a $500,000 thing. But with a life insurance, it's possible, or let's say a term, because that's the cheapest out there. What happens is you can protect yourself at $500,000, and let's say you do pass away let's say something happens in between, you're covered for the bank, because you're gonna have another $250,000 surplus for your, I don't know, funeral expenses. You don't only have that emotional burden, you have a financial burden too that comes with somebody. So you're kind of getting two birds with one stone, that you're getting the full amount. Does that kind of make sense? I kind of said that really fast.
Well, let me see if I understand correctly for those people, and if I don't, well, you're going to be able to correct me. So what I'm understanding, and I think I do because I had this discussion prior. When I bought my house, I needed to have two things: invalidity insurance, so if I would get hurt or something like that, and the mortgage insurance, that if I died, the house would be paid off.
I think it depends on what bank you're with, or
my financial institution. The problem is that as I continue paying year after year, they're not going to cover me for the total amount that I would have gotten on day one. Right. So I let's say I'm 15 years in paying my house. I have like $100,000 to pay left. They're only going to pay that $100,000, but I'm always going to pay the same price, versus if I would buy a life insurance for that same amount, I would get $500,000 and not $100,000. So is that what I'm understanding right now?
Yeah, and they would have to accept that as well. If your institution obliges it. Mine didn't, for when you, lucky me.
Yeah, mine either.
Oh, good. But some do, though. It's important to know. That's why you have to work with professionals like Jonathan, that has a good network of people that understand what they're doing and brokering mortgages as well. That's something I do. I can't talk on that, but I know he has a good network for that. So that's pretty important.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you. Well, you know what? Let's come back to this at the end. I had two other questions that I wanted to.
Yeah.
There's one that we actually just answered. So let me ask you this one: how can someone leverage equity in their home for other financial goals?
There's something called the Smith maneuver. I don't want to go too much into that. It's not for everybody. It's a very, very specific case, but you can look it up. It's very, I don't want to go too much into that. But there's, you could leverage it, or you can buy, like, it depends on the person, right? It depends on who you are as an individual. If you want to start owning more blocks or start going with stuff, you can leverage part of your house to also buy another property if you're kind of that leadership kind of person, or you can, if you're handy, or if you maybe, I don't know, if you have, it depends on the person. In other words, if it's appropriate in the first place.
Okay, fair enough. And what should people know about property? Well, no, that's the one you actually, we talked about taxes and stuff like that before. So any strategies for paying off mortgage faster without overextending financially, though?
Yeah, well, there's a few philosophies out there. Depends who you ask. Again, depending on the person. There's the paying it bi-weekly, which there's more weeks in a year than months, right? So if you could accelerate that payment, it all depends on the numbers. Personally, and I don't suggest for everybody to do that, but I personally just invest the difference because I like my returns on the market. But there's that as well. So at the end goal, when I get I can just jump in and throw 20% or whatever the bank allows me a shot at a time. That's also has to do with planning. Right? But as my money's growing, the difference. So you can do the 2 weeks. You can do that, or there's just so many things that you can kind of do for that. I don't know if
There's also another thing. Since I talk a lot to mortgage people, with
Oh,
certain institution, you can actually do two things more. So let's say that you have a good budget, you're financially safe because it starts
sure.
with that. Okay, so I know that you can actually pay 25 grand at the end of a year without any
Mm,
penalty.
yeah.
Plus, you can actually double your mortgage per year.
Double your mortgage.
Yes, depending on it's always and it depends on the institution.
Sure, sure,
So
sure.
you
Yeah.
should ask your institution, but they won't tell you this because that makes it so that you can actually pay your mortgage a lot faster.
Yeah.
But with my institution personally, I can actually give 25 grand per year plus double my mortgage in order to get rid of it as fast as possible. So this is something actually which is really cool.
Double your monthly obligation for the
Yeah,
mortgage, plus the 25 grand in a year.
plus the 25 grand, and
Is
that goes.
that
Hmm?
That's over 20%.
Yeah,
Cool.
without any type of penalty. It's
Good.
insane. And I
That's really
learned
good.
this like about
Yeah.
last year when I did have a conversation for my mortgage renewal. So this would be something that I would actually invite everyone to go talk about with their financial, what their mortgage people at the bank, what type
Sure.
of payment they can
Yeah.
actually do in order to pay their mortgage faster. I want to wrap it up and bring it around with when you how was your process when you bought your first home?
Well, I was with the best realtor, right? So it was pretty good.
Okay.
And the process. Oh, okay. All jokes aside, the process. Well, can you kind of walk me through what you mean by how was the process?
Well,
Kind of
talk to me
specific.
about your experience. I mean, how did you feel you were treated? How did you feel? Did you find it fair? Were you well accompanied? Were you well surrounded by, in order to make your buying process a positive adventure?
Yeah. Well, it was absolutely great. We got so we well, but I'll just say it. We had that's part of the game, right? Sometimes you gotta lose money to lose, to be able to get to where you need to go. Not lose money, but it's an added value. So I had to have two homes inspected before I found the one that I wanted. Because if I took the first one, I would have lost a lot more than just that inspection.
That
So
house was something
yeah,
special.
so that money was well spent, right?
Yeah.
So it saved me a lot of money and possible consequences down the road. So I saw that as an investment, actually.
Agreed.
So when we got to the second house that I'm living in right now, this is my office space that I built. But with my significant other at the time, and we just loved it. We just loved the property. And then Jonathan introduced me to a lot of people in his network for that, like a mortgage broker and well, obviously the person that inspects the property, the home inspector. Very, very kind people answering right away to your demands. Really tailoring most of the mortgage broker really tailoring more towards your specific needs, knowing kind of the ins and outs of each bank for the situation. Going back on that, actually, that house that we did not manage to take
Yeah.
with that mortgage broker at the time, it was in a zone where you couldn't really borrow because the banks were kind of more difficult in that kind of zone. But this individual,
If I remember correctly, it wasn't a flood zone.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's
it.
it.
It wasn't a flood zone.
It's not necessarily a bad place. I didn't want to scare anybody off by saying that because I am an investor.
They should be afraid today. You know why?
Oh.
Quite caveat because of the fact that banks don't loan there anymore.
I know,
It's
right?
incredible.
But it's just an example. It's just an example because there's other situations that you need to have a good mortgage broker because they can walk you through and know the exact process with what bank to do to be suitable for you. And your network was very, very accommodating for that, including you. I didn't talk enough about you, but you managed to get me money back from the house on several times when we were negotiating, and they tried to pull a move like, oh, my family is going to be moving in and something like that, and you really guided me that they wanted to buy, and you really kind of guided me through the process of how
Yeah.
we should negotiate with them. A complete added value went super smooth. You sent out a CV for me. We got all of this done, and you got me the best price. And now the house has went up in value.
It did.
So
It was a
I'm
beautiful
happy,
year, man.
not with the renovations, but just being in the market.
I
So
agree.
I fantastic.
All right. So I want to bring it full circle here.
Yeah.
Any last word about what we talked about?
No, there's just so much to cover, right? There's some things I probably missed, but that's the whole point. You can't go over everything in an hour or so of that. It's just to really scratch the surface and kind of peel the onion. But everything situation dictates per individual. There's no one cookie cutter advice. You need to know people's personal needs and the goals before you can give tailored advice to get them into their sweet spot and what's good for them emotionally as well.
All right. So as I lead this to the end of the podcast, I want to remember everybody that all the information of Jeorey Downey will be in the description. The guy is a superhero. He's a good friend of mine. He doesn't like when I talk like that, but he went and fight the fires when we were burning around here. He went to aid people when the floods came in. I mean, the guy's a good guy. And what I wanted to tell you is this: is so if ever you need any financial advice, you'll have all his information. And I know he's going to tell me, I'm just this old boring dude, but he's my boring dude, and he's and he's a good boring dude. Furthermore, if ever you want to get into contact, if ever you're moving in 9 days or 90 days and you need help with your project, my information will be there also. You can actually just give me a call so we can ask ourselves a couple of questions to see how I can possibly help you out. In the meantime, my name is Jonathan Cabana, your real estate agent for the Greater Montreal. Thank you for listening. Subscribe and don't hesitate to comment up. Have a great evening and talk to you soon. Okay, take care. Bye.